that it was unknown that the jobs of Black were needed, but we knew they were needed here. What happens? In that original proposal, the word will says they leave and that person dies. That will never happen. Whatever you want to present, I'm happy to hear about. But you can't risk a human life. You can't put the jurisdiction above human life.
But we can't sacrifice a life in our own district.
You don't know there's a life to sacrifice yet. All you know is that there's a call. That's why we originally put it, that's why we put in the senior responding officers need to have a quick discussion about what they think they need to do. Because you can't put a human life at risk just to leave, because it's your responsibility to call the equipment somewhere that you don't even know you need it yet.
If it comes in though as an update with possible extrication or something like that, our responsibility is
And now
to
we get
that
into this
person.
unfortunate loop.
Because
the city's hope is that over the course of some time here, we're going to start getting the equipment so that it's not entirely dependent, that we start duplicating so that we don't have these dependencies that cause these problems. That are the worry is the word will. I mean,
But that's how a mutual aid agreement works though, quite frankly.
I understand, but we're all gonna get sued if the person dies. No matter what your argument is, we're all gonna get sued. So in the end, the purpose of the council, one of their main purposes, is to minimize liability to the city. And that's a huge liability loophole.
I understand.
So, but that's a future discussion, because that brings up the second issue. The mayor was reminding me earlier before the meeting started that traditionally the mutual aid agreement and the MOU about the building were separate documents, and you had mentioned this yourself. I didn't realize at the time when that initial document came in, because it started bringing some of these things together anyway. Let's separate them. Let's have this discussion second. Let's resolve the MOU for the building now. So my goal right now would be to authorize the mayor to move forward with resolving the MOU for the building, strip out everything that would have to do with mutual aid, and get that document in place. And let's restart the discussion about what does mutual aid look like. Do you mind?
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, we felt the same way, that they needed to remain separate documents.
Okay, and that's why I preempted you, Peter,
Yeah.
because it's a discussion that we really don't want to have tonight.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair, and I was going to talk about that as well. The older document that we saw was the building document, correct?
The original one for rural
Yeah.
was, I think it was the building document, well, it had these other items tacked into it.
The document that maybe Vicky provided it. I
Oh,
think
the
it was-
original one from the 80s.
Yeah, it was like a 4 or 5 page. Yeah.
Okay,
So
let's not be calling the eighties
No,
ancient.
yeah.
No kidding.
but yeah, I think it discussed the acquisition of the building and division of it. So I guess what I'm asking, I don't recall seeing the original. If the MOU for mutual aid was separate, I don't recall seeing an older version of that.
But is that important at this point?
Well, he's making the representation that they have been separate, and I would just like to see what was contained therein, because okay, so this is the mutual aid agreement, but yeah, this addresses property, right, and equipment. So,
And equipment from the perspective of how it's stored and maintained
Right.
on the property.
so this is the older mutual aid agreement is what you're representing, and then so we don't have the older.
That's all we had from back in '85.
Okay.
Which is a story you're gonna discover is more common than you might wish.
Yeah. So, but from my perspective, this looks like one document, right?
Aren't they separate?
Originally, when they were planning on building the building, yes. Where
When-
that is,
Okay.
That was after '85.
no.
No?
Before they ever built the building,
And then I thought they made a new agreement.
it would be
I
85.
think it's valuable to separate the documents just so that mutual aid isn't trying to leverage the MOU and vice versa.
Sure.
Separate them and make it.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I just want to point out, it looks like they're one document here.
And the building agreement can basically be real simple.
Well, and it sounded like you had no objections to that aspect of what, of this
There's
proposal.
there's a couple of additions or changes,
All right.
corrections,
Can we focus
typos,
on that?
typos maybe.
So I'm going to regain control of my meeting and ask Tom and Todd if they would go through the document from top, you know, from the beginning to the end. What edits are you looking at?
Just in regard to the building, yes, Tom, go ahead.
Well, the first one that came to my mind when I was reading this was under definitions. It says the property located at Townsend original town site on down block 34, lot 17 through 19, owned by the city of Townsend. That is not correct. The city owns 17, and we each have 50% interest in 18 and 19.
We need to see the deeds.
Well, I went to the courthouse, and that's how it's registered in the book.
Yeah, I mean, we pulled it off of cadastral, and cadastral is a crapshoot as to whether or not it's accurate.
Because when we're dealing with two members of the board now that are second generation, and both of us were told by our dads that the rural bought a lot and the city bought one, but when it got recorded down there, it's half interest in both, which still boils down to one is one.
You didn't take copies of the recorded deeds?
Well, I didn't look at the deeds, I just looked at the book, the ownership book,
Okay, I want to see, we need to see the
see the
deeds.
deeds. Because we may have bought one and the city bought one and it just got recorded as half interest in both. That was the first thing I saw.
Okay,
Then Todd came up with something later down in here.
okay. Under the, I'm presuming we're moving down into the agreements bullet points.
As soon as we check his notes here.
Okay.
The one very simple one was in the very last paragraph that, and I guess I'm trying to look through quick to see what would be appropriate for mutual aid agreement and what for the building agreement. But in regard to invoices, I just thought it appropriate to add that, that a sentence for all invoices to be paid by the rural fire district would go to the address, to our mailing address as well. Just so that both are stated and reciprocated there.
And your official mailing address is the address of the fire hall, right? Okay.
That makes absolute sense.
Said that your bills go to you and we say, well, yeah, our bills should come to
Right.
us.
Right, that-
Kind of.
And I think the only other paragraph really is the first one that applies to a building agreement. And I felt that was pretty clear and understood. The rest of the document, I think, really pertains to a mutual aid agreement.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that.
First bullet point, pull out into an MOU.
The first and last.
Right.
Yep.
We can work with that.
Yeah, the sharing the bills and stuff, that's all fine and dandy. We've done a lot that we never billed the city for. There's a solar system on the roof that was put in either 98 or 9, somewhere in there. chief at the time bucked that through the system. Didn't cost either one of us anything, but it's our backup power. And we used it twice that I know of when the town had no power. They call up fire department. And we put in the air compressor system, piped it through the whole building to plug trucks in. And because the city didn't have a truck that had air brakes at that time, so we just paid for that. We didn't split the bill with you guys because you didn't have it. Now you have a truck for it. So, but we've done okay. If we had a garage door needed work, we just paid for it. If it was one the rural was using all the time, garage door openers same way. We've always just
If I could take a brief moment.
You did offer insurance for how many years, Tom?
Nicole, please don't, sorry, sidebar like that, appreciate it. Councilman Howick.
Very briefly, the reason for that last paragraph is literally because of things like this. We've had joint rural and city fire chiefs in the personage of one person who just simply took care of everything. And over the course of years, unfortunately, at least the city has lost track of really what should we be dealing with and what shouldn't we be dealing with. We don't know. And so we've got Nicole and Sean working through the details to try to figure out what is the correct separation to make sure that this is all fair. Honestly, I have no doubt you could come up with a list like that. And I'm willing to bet you've only got 10% of it.
probably 25.
25, time has passed. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to walk away from the past, but for the future, we wanna make sure that all of the billing is appropriate so that there's transparency to all of the citizens. Thanks, Mayor.
Anything else?
And I guess to your point, I don't feel there's any animosity
No,
between the
no.
district and the
We're just trying to
the
figure out our
city.
budget.
It's just it's been how things have been handled, and I think we've worked well together, so.
We haven't actually had a joint board meeting between the two in Lord knows how long. The last time we really needed to have a joint board to discuss anything was when we had the pipe burst and flooded the building. Up about either 18 or 22 inches deep. That all went through the insurance, but that would have been about the last time we seriously would have needed the joint board to sit down. And we didn't then either.
Okay. I believe where we are is, get the deeds for the lots, and we'll pull out first and last bullet items under agreement and incorporate those into an MOU. And that will make then what is currently the fourth bullet item, the third bullet item. And we need to work with that language to clarify that, as best we can, who stays on what fire if there's a second call. And is there anything else?
There are, as it pertains to a mutual aid agreement. I don't know if you want to take the time to talk about that now, or just reserve everything in regard to a mutual aid agreement for a different meeting.
What is council's pleasure tonight?
Wait, so the MOU that you're discussing